Hey everyone. I am back for another week of This Week in Parenting. I actually didn't get anyone that suggested an alternative name, so I guess I'm going to stick with This Week in Parenting for now. If you have another idea, I would still love to hear it. I do have my coffee with me, and it's been another week where it's kind of like, Friday and we need the coffee. And I wanted to start by just talking about all the frustrating and disappointing news out there. I think oftentimes it's really hard, especially for those of us that are like trying our best to do what we can to help with all of this coronavirus stuff. When you see the news reports about the people in the Ozarks, or hear about large gatherings, and I hear in the office about people that see their neighbors out having big soirees because people aren't working and getting together, and it's really frustrating. And it makes you question if what you're doing even really matters or makes a difference, or am I going to do all this and I'm going to sacrifice so much, but then other people aren't going to do it and it's not going to make a difference, and we're keeping our kids out of daycare, or we're working from home and it's stressful and all those sort of things. And oftentimes you wonder, well, is everyone doing this or does it matter? But I can tell you that the data shows that it does matter. We, this week, the last full week of May, passed 100,000 deaths in the United States. And locally, we have done quite well compared to a lot of other places because we had time and because we have a lot of people that are dedicated to social distancing. And I have been so impressed, despite the national news coverage of people that aren't holding up their end of the bargain. There is so many people that are working really hard and giving and sacrificing for the greater good. Because if you're watching this, the likelihood that you're going to have serious disease is probably pretty low. Mostly parents, mostly healthy. Your kids will likely have severe disease, non-severe disease as well. But there's plenty of people out there that won't, and we know that because there's been 100,000 deaths in the United States, the most in the entire world, despite not having the most largest population of any country in the world. We've had the most deaths, which means there's plenty that we can do better to keep the spread as low as possible. And I know that it's not easy and it often requires great sacrifice when you don't see other people doing the same. But I can tell you that it makes a difference. And I can tell you that what we are doing locally in our families, in our communities, is helping. And so I would encourage you to stay strong. We're going to talk. I did an Instagram story yesterday asking for questions, and I got very similar themes across the board. People have moved from the phase of what does it look like, what does the disease look like, is my kid going to get it, into how can we safely reopen, how can we safely return to whatever the new normal is going to look like for the next while. And so we're going to talk about those questions too, but I just wanted to give you all encouragement that what you're doing does make a difference. The wearing the mask, the social distancing, those are the things that are helping to prevent the spread of the illness. And now we're talking, we think that we're past the peak because we're seeing a decrease in the curves locally. We know that there's the opportunity for surges still. Some of the, like the medical center in Omaha and other places, are still having their inpatient census continue to rise. And so we know that there's a delay. And I'll be curious to see with Memorial Day and some of the things locally that happen with Memorial Day and the gatherings and whatnot, if we see a spike in the next 5 to 7 days resulting because of some of the local um, episodes where people were not practicing social distancing, and that results in spread, or maybe it won't, and then we'll have more information and more knowledge going forward. So what we're going to talk about in this video is daycare, about grandparents, about return to normal, because those are the questions that I get over and over again. Is like, can we go to the zoo? Can we do baseball? Can we do all these sorts of things? And so we're going to touch on that later in the video. I wanted to start by sharing something more positive and uplifting and something that's un-COVID related. Um, I got to sit down with Dr. Tina Payne Bryson, who, if you're not familiar with her name, probably because you just haven't looked at your bookshelf lately, because she has written, along with Dan Seigel, a number of books. The Yes Brain being one of them, that's the closest in arm's reach. The Whole Brain Child, No Drama Discipline, um, The Power of Showing Up, bunch of books on parenting. And I've heard from so many people that they love her books. I recommend them highly. I got to sit down and do a really long discussion with her for my podcast, Parenting Matters. Now, if you haven't caught the whole podcast, you can go to my podcast at Parenting Matters. It's called Parenting Matters. If you go to drb.show/listen, you can find it there too. Um, and if you go to my YouTube channel, you can find it as well, which if you go to drb.show/watch, you can find my YouTube channel. And you'll find the interview. It's also on my Facebook page. It's everywhere, basically. But we sit down and we talk through some very specific scenarios of what to do, because these books are fantastic and have lots of good ideas, but oftentimes parents in the trenches are like, okay, but this doesn't apply because of this specific context, or this doesn't really fit because my kid loves this and not that. So we talked through some very specific scenarios that might have been born out of reality. I won't, subject those that are involved to scrutiny. So I just tried to make them a little more anonymous, but I think you'll see that they could very much apply to your kid and your family. And so I just wanted to share a brief clip from that because I think it's such a good lesson and good information. And so we'll do that, and then I'll talk through all of the COVID questions. So I hope you enjoyed this interview with Tina Payne Bryson, and listen to the full interview or watch it on YouTube, however you like. Let's take another scenario.
Okay.
We have a 9-year-old who just launched the remote across the room, broke a mirror because of some slight injustice, whatever. And you're in that scene in that very moment when the mirror breaks and he looks, and, how would you handle that sort of scenario where you've got a little bit older kid, a little bit more severe issue?
Yeah.
So take that.
Property damage. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so my first question is, and rarely, you heard me earlier say, address the feeling, address the behavior, and move the heck on. Rarely do I give formulas because it so much depends on your kid and you and all these things. So can you give me just one more bit of information about how did the child respond when the mirror broke?
Stopped, big eyes of, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to do that. And then, immediately the situation became much more real. It wasn't just our typical, outburst, meltdown, sort of thing.
Yeah. And I asked that part because I had a kid who got so mad one time and slammed the door and the glass broke. And immediately the child just burst into tears and just felt horrible, that kind of thing. So yeah, stopping and kind of like, oh no, I didn't mean for that to happen. So what I would do is I would go over to my 9-year-old. I would try to, depending on how your child responds to touch, first I would take a breath and make sure I'm calm. The child has already had a natural consequence. Now, and I just want to just take 1 second to talk about natural consequences versus logical consequences. A natural consequence is something that happens just without anything you're doing, like a mirror broke, right? You didn't make the mirror break. Or if your kid leaves their bike outside and the bike seat is wet and then the kid's upset that they can't ride their bike, that's a natural consequence. A logical consequence is something we do to the child that makes sense given the crime, right? So like a logical consequence would be like, now you have to do jobs to earn money to replace the mirror. Okay, so that would be a logical consequence. But so there's already a natural consequence. The mirror has broken. He has already seen the impact for what his behavior did. And he probably feels startled and maybe even a little bit bad, but maybe not yet. Maybe still just angry and waiting. So I would go over, calm myself first, take a breath, put my arm around the kid and say, you got so mad. And I would actually kind of begin to tell the story. You got so mad. Do you want to tell me what happened? Right. And allow the child to explain. And then say, I know you didn't mean for that mirror to break. Did that surprise you? And I would do very little talking. I would ask questions and pause and allow my child to feel and allow them to work it through and talk about it with me. And then I would say, it's totally okay to be mad, but it's not okay to throw things because people or things can get hurt. And you clearly saw that. You saw that happened. So what do you think we should do now? What do you think we should do about the mirror? And hopefully the kid says, well, I should clean it up. I should help clean it up. Or, maybe we should get a new mirror. And you can actually prompt them. You can say, I have some ideas, but I want to see what your ideas are first. Again, making them do the work. Right. And then I would also add in that other piece, remembering that it's a learning opportunity. When you get that mad, what could you do differently next time? And, again, depending on how patient your child is in that moment and how open they are, I might even say, when you were so angry right before you threw the remote, what did that feel like in your body? And kids are actually pretty good at doing this. Like, they can say, I felt like I was going to explode. My whole body felt like it was red and on fire, or whatever they describe it, or it was like a volcano. And to say, okay, good, that's so good. You figured that out, because next time you have that feeling coming, you need to let some of that feeling out, but in a way that's not going to be hurtful to things and to people. So, and then, there are some strategies we can teach kids, like jumping up and down, moving their body, swinging, yelling into a pillow, asking for help. We know that when we get angry, we have a lot of nervous system arousal. It's like the volume dial gets turned way up, and we can actually teach kids that when they get that sensation in their body, they can release some of that nervous system arousal by breathing where their exhale is longer than their inhale, by moving their bodies, by swinging or rocking or doing something rhythmic, asking for help, crying and yelling and laughing. All three of those also release nervous system arousal. So it's, again, an opportunity to talk to them about, what do you do when you get that feeling? It might mean to walk. For me, when I get that feeling I'm about to say or do something that's not something I want to be, that I would be proud of, I walk away. I go and I walk away, and I have to move my body. I pace a couple times, like I'm out walking the neighborhood, in my slippers, because that's what I have. But those are opportunities to do that. But they saw the consequence already. Right. They probably already feel bad, and I would let them feel it and walk through a reflective dialogue.
I think that's such a great approach. And I really, really like and appreciate how you clarified between natural consequences and logical consequences, because I think that is really helpful for parents to understand. And I think that is a really good approach for when oh my gosh, what did I just do? Well, I didn't mean to do that. And then working through how to make it right again, and allowing them to play a role in the making it right again, and focusing on their security and safety and those sorts of things. Just
a really quick on that is, and this is obviously different from trauma, but we know in the PTSD research that if something traumatic happens and you are passive and you don't do anything, you're actually much more likely to have PTSD and have more dramatic effects than if you do something. So that's just something we can dial it way back to this scenario, which is obviously nothing close to a trauma, but the idea that when you actively do something in a situation, it can build competence and confidence and mastery. That's a really great thing. And the other thing is, when natural consequences happen, because it's not anything you've done, your kid waits till the last minute to turn in their 3D model of a cell, and it looks like crap, and they get a D. They come home, and you're like, you can give them all the empathy in the world. Like, you're so disappointed you got a bad grade about that. And, or it's so sad your baseball bat got stolen because you left it at the field. That's so sad. I know you love that bat, or that really startled you when that mirror broke. And you can give a lot of empathy and connection in that moment, and they're still learning the lesson. So you get that connect before the redirect, really just by giving empathy.
I love it. That is a really good approach for dealing with those uncomfortable moments as well, and those frustrations on the kids' part, the solar system. That's a great one. So one thing that you said there that I wanted to touch on too is, I feel like a lot of what we're talking about today is the issue has occurred, and now we're talking about how we're going to address it next time. And for the child, what next time is going to look like. What's happened has happened, what's done is done, but next time this is how it could go, and things could be better. So I feel like that is something that I really try and impress upon parents too, is it doesn't matter much what the behavior that we dealt with was. That's over now, but how are we going to handle it going forward? How can we do a little bit better next time when we have those big emotions, or the frustration, or the hurt, or those sorts of things?
And I would say that behavior is communication. I mean, really, I have this activity I love to do with parents in a group, where I ask them to make a list, and the list, they have them right at the top, discipline problems, and to think about one kid and to list the 2 or 3 biggest discipline problems, like what drives them the most crazy, what they worry about the most, what causes the most drama, and to list those 2 or 3 things. And then I ask them to cross out the title of that list. It's no longer called discipline problems. It's called skills, and skills my child needs to learn. So
Right.
when we think it's the same behaviors, like I work at a school part-time, and like we had this first grader who got in trouble because he said butt crack during library time. And like, obviously that's not appropriate language at school. But
Totally.
if we think about this, that your kids are telling you with their behavior, they're like loud and clear telling you, these are the areas I don't yet have skills and strategies. And to some
Mm-hmm.
degree, we may have unrealistic expectations developmentally. They may not be able to do that consistently, but really they're telling you, these are the areas I don't have skills in yet. So this little kid said butt crack in the library. And when we became curious to say, why would he do that behavior? I mean, first grade boy, we all think butt crack's still funny to us as adults, right? But when we became curious, this was a kid who really had difficulty entering play with his peers. But when he said butt crack, he was super successful. His friends joined with him and he was successful. So he basically was saying, this was my best strategy I could think of. Someone please give me some skills and strategies to enter play appropriately with kids. So instead of punishing him or doing something to him, we then saw our job as teachers and parents was to help him build those skills. He didn't have them and he needed help. That was his best way of doing things. And so your kids are telling you, my kids are telling me the areas they still need skill building. And so that's
Oh,
where we
that's
can
a good
go,
way to look at it too. I
yeah,
really
how
like
do
that.
that's again back to that idea of teaching. Like my kids telling me, I don't handle anger. When I feel angry, I don't handle my emotions well, or I don't handle disappointment well, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is.
The third scenario that I had talked through, or actually, yeah, I want to talk about one more scenario,
Yeah.
which is along the same lines of building those skills. And this was a 6-year-old who melts down at the slightest discomfort, or this, just falls apart way easier and lacks the resiliency that one would hope for a 6-year-old. How do you help that child to just on a regular basis build those skills of resilience?
Yeah. So two things. I mean, one is we want to make sure first, and this is why we always approach any behavior with curiosity as parents and as professionals. We want to make sure that what we're seeing is still in the window of what's developmentally appropriate. So for instance, if a 1-year-old has a meltdown every time I put her in a car seat, that's developmentally appropriate. But if a 6-year-old has a massive tantrum that lasts more than 20 minutes every time we go to put the booster seat on, for me, I would say, okay, that's outside of what I would expect developmentally. So I would want
Sure.
to be curious and say, okay, let's peel back the layers. She's having a stress response that's kind of outside of what we would expect. So I would want to be curious about what's causing her nervous system to go into these threat states over an everyday type of thing. So the
Mm-hmm.
first kinds of things, I mean, I'd be curious about trauma history. I'd be curious.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that and got something out of it. If you want to catch the rest of it, just go to the podcast Parenting Matters. That's the easiest way to watch it or to listen to it. Or if you are a watcher, then go to YouTube. I would love to know how you consume parenting stuff as well. So if you could take a moment and comment below. I usually listen to audiobooks, I listen to podcasts, I watch Instagram stories, or I read books, whatever it is that you do. I would love to know that because I'm always looking for the best way to reach parents. And so if that's books, if that's YouTube, if that's podcasts, if that's Instagram stories, I would love to hear from you. So just comment below the one place where you get most of your parenting related knowledge that you're trying to acquire. Podcasts are huge. I know that. That's why I have a podcast. But maybe there's some way that I could connect better with you, or Facebook Lives, or whatever it is. Comment below so I know what that is. Now, there's a few things that I wanted to talk through today. I think what we have all really quickly learned is what the idea of a risk benefit analysis is. You do this all the time, but you've probably never given it so much intention and so much uncertainty about what the risk, what the benefit is on any given thing. This has required so many more conversations and thoughts and mental energy than anything probably most of us have dealt with, at least in the last decade, if not most of our lives. And so all of the stuff that we're talking about is really risk benefit ratios and what that actually means in practice, and what we're going to do for our family. The most common one that I'm getting asked right now is about daycare. Can we go back to daycare? Can we send our kids back to daycare? We're going to get called back to work soon. We got to start being more productive. Our kids are probably driving us just a little bit crazy and could use the social interaction, what does that look like? Maybe comment below if you're at that place where you're wondering if we're going back to daycare is appropriate, or if we can just pull the trigger and do it. Now, right now, my patients in my practice in Lincoln, Nebraska, I can't speak for around the country or around the world what the right answer is, but parents have been asking me, and I'm getting off the fence and saying that I think it's fine to return to daycare as needed. If you can keep them out, great. That's just less germs to transmit. But for a lot of families, that's not sustainable. It's not sustainable in the long term, nor really in the short term. Like, this has been a huge undertaking for a lot of families, and not going to daycare has been a huge, huge burden for a lot of different reasons. Most families can't sustain it. And so at some point, we have to decide, okay, we're going to go back to daycare. And now that we are past our peak, starting to see cases recede, that is the appropriate time, in my opinion, to say, okay, we do need to send our child back to daycare. Let's send him back to daycare. You have to jump off the fence too and say, okay, I'm okay with this now, or I'm not okay with this now. Let's reassess. And I would just in general, for all of these questions that we have, talk it through, decide, move on. You can re-talk it through and cast so much doubt on yourself if you're making the right decision, but I would at least do it on a weekly basis rather than every day. Is today the right day? Should we do that? Say on Sunday nights we're going to make the decision for the week, or maybe on Thursday nights we're going to make the decision for the next week so that we can get things lined up appropriately. And if there's a surge in cases, maybe that will be a new decision point for us of, okay, can we, pivot and move a little bit? But I wouldn't constantly be questioning yourself, constantly be questioning if you're doing the right thing, because it's just so much mental energy and mental work. Make a decision, stick with that decision. Now, with sending them back to daycare, kids can't wear masks. I mean, I can't keep socks on my 1-year-old or my 4-year-old. There's no way they're going to keep something on their face that's annoying and bothersome and difficult to keep on. Like, a lot of adults can't do a very good job of keeping masks on, as we've seen. And so asking kids to wear masks is just a non-starter in my book. So what does that mean about the spread of illness? Well, we're going to practice hand hygiene, and I know that daycares are going to be all over this too, because they want to stay open, they want to serve their families, they also want to stay in business, which means they have to do what they can to limit the spread so that everyone's not doing this put them in, pull them back out, put them in, pull them back out sort of thing. So we're going to be doing hand washing really well and encouraging that. 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, they're not going to social distance. We can't anticipate that they're going to do that reliably. And so what we're going to do is we're going to essentially be co-bubbling, which is the idea of, when I'm at home, I have my little bubble and it's all by myself and we can control that. But when we're going to go back out to daycare or grandparents or those sort of things, our Venn diagram is widening, which means there's more people that are overlapping with us. We're not with them all the time, but we're with them some of the time, and so the risk of transmission increases. What that requires is a discussion amongst the daycare providers and the families of, how can we do this safely? Well, if everybody can consider, the size of their bubble and what they're exposing, then that will help to limit the spread of coronavirus as it moves through a community, as things start to reopen. If we can co-bubble, meaning this family that goes to daycare with us, they're doing the best that they can, we're doing the best that we can, the daycare provider's doing the best that they can, well, then we're going to kind of still limit our spread. We're not going to have parents that are going off and doing whatever isn't social distancing, and then bringing that to their kids, and then their kids go to daycare where they commingle with our kids, and then we're getting exposures through that. We're going to do the best that we can to co-bubble, because essentially what we're trying to do is prevent the spread to the other families, grandparents that are elderly, or grandparents that have chronic illnesses, or parent that has chronic illnesses, or coworker of our daycare colleague that has a chronic illness or something like that. So what we're going to do is say, we're going to go to daycare, but we're also going to be really careful outside of daycare, because we know that if we as the adults catch it in our job or in our outings and things like that, we could spread it to our kid, who could then give it to their friends at daycare. This could all happen before anybody is aware of it, and then that's how the ripple effect and the expanding disease burden will happen. If on the flip side we can create a small bubble and say, we're going to be extra careful because we're sending our child to daycare and we're not going to expose others, then we're going to help limit that spread and create bubbles, little Venn diagrams that don't expand into bigger and bigger Venn diagrams, but stay small. I hope that makes sense. Maybe comment below if that makes sense, if you get the idea of what co-bubbling could actually look like. You know, it's a tough conversation to have with people, but I think it's really important. And I think that most people understand the value of that discussion and that risk benefit. And I was thinking of how could I help? Because it's kind of an awkward conversation, or it's kind of getting into personal details. And so what I'm going to do this weekend is put together a little bit of a little video that you can share with your fellow daycare colleague parents and the daycare provider and say, hey, what do you all think about this? It kind of takes the burden off of you from being like, hey, can you please, quit doing those outings that you're doing? Or can you guys be really careful? You don't want to really look like that person, although I think that you should. And if everybody looks like that person, then it's not really that person. But I'm going to put a little video together that you can share and say, hey, can we all get on board with this, and kind of make a pact that we're going to send our kids to daycare knowing that everyone else that's not at the daycare is going to really work hard to social distance and mask and do the appropriate things so that we keep our bubble as small as possible and lower the risk of disease. So if you would like a copy of that video, I can get it to you. I'll post it. But if you want to make sure that you get it as soon as it comes out, the easiest way for me to transmit these things out to a large group is just over my text platform. So if you text the word parenting, parenting, to 31996, then I will make sure and get that to you as soon as it's available. And then what you can do is just share it out to your fellow daycare parents or your daycare provider and say, do you think you could just kind of distribute this, because this has some good principles of social distancing, hand washing, and co-bubbling, so that everybody's keeping their bubbles as small as possible and we can feel safe and confident that we're doing everything we can with sending our child to daycare. Text the word parenting to 31996, and that will make it really easy for me to just push that information out most easily and quickly to you over text, so that you can share it with those that need to hear it and see it. Okay, so we're going to say, okay, we can go back to daycare. We're going to keep an eye on the news. We don't need to watch the news every day and decide every day if it's okay for daycare. We can do that on a weekly decision unless something drastic happens. If there's exposures in daycare, then we're going to have to reassess. If it's going through the daycare, then what we're going to do is probably say, okay, we're going to pull our child out, and then once things calm down, put them back in. That's a discussion more amongst families, amongst you and your doctor, the appropriate steps to do. That's daycare. Again, if you want the little video that will keep things from feeling awkward, sharing it, I'm happy to be the one that, here's what this pediatrician that we know and trust says about daycare and how to limit exposure. What do you all think about this? Can we do this? Text the word parenting to 31996. Grandparents. Grandparents is, again, a tough spot, and a lot of parents are asking about grandparents. I think, everybody wants to see their grandparents. They know that it's important to see them. And really, I think the main risk is just asymptomatically spreading it to grandparents, because grandparents are older. They have more chronic illnesses because of age. They're around other people because of their social circles and work circles and everything like that, where they're at a higher risk for potentially giving it to somebody else. And so we want to see grandparents. We want to keep everyone safe, but those are important things. Like, we can't not see our grandparents until there's a vaccine, because we're talking 12, 18, 24 months before there's a vaccine. So obviously we're going to get back to seeing grandparents at some point. When is it safe to do it? How is it safe to do it? I'd say if you're sending your child back to daycare, try and get some grandparent time in with them before you send them back to daycare, because right now your bubble is smaller. Your bubble is going to expand when you send them back to daycare. If you can, while your bubble is smaller and the risk of transmission is lower, at that point say, okay, let's see grandparents, because tomorrow we're going to go to daycare and we want to get our grandparent time in before then. Perfect. I think that's a great way to get to see grandparents without overexposing them. Then what you might do is, okay, they're back in daycare, everyone's co-bubbling, we feel pretty safe and confident about, everybody being on board with this. We can keep seeing grandparents on a semi-regular basis. Probably not what it was like before, because we just want to reduce those opportunities for potential exposure, but maybe every week or every 2 weeks or every month or something like that, we're going to get to see grandparents or those other close people to us that we love and that we need to see. In the meantime, filling in the gaps with Zoom calls or FaceTime or whatnot, so that we have that. Now, because grandparents have a higher risk of medical conditions, it might be okay, we're going to go to daycare for 3 or 4 weeks, and then we're going to have another stay at home week. We'll make sure that everyone's kind of semi quarantined and then see grandparents again, especially if your grandparents or the other loved ones that you want to see have chronic medical concerns. That would be a really appropriate way, in my opinion, to try and keep things safe. Not always possible for everybody, but I think if we can kind of work together to make sure we have co-bubbled so that daycare is okay, then I think it's okay for grandparents to be around their grandchildren. Now, again, kids are not good at wearing masks. Around grandparents, it still feels weird. If you can get them to do it, great. That is like a smaller sort of setting where you'll be closer with the kids and might be able to control that, unlike daycare, which just kind of, no matter how small the daycare is, it's a little bit of a zoo and you can't tend to everyone's mask all the time. And it would be really stressful, I can imagine, as a daycare provider saying, yeah, we're going to keep everyone masked the whole time they're here. That would, I mean, I can't even imagine that. Um, Whatever you do with grandparents is just make a decision and say, this is our decision for the next 2 weeks. This is our decision for the next week. This is our decision for the next month. Then we'll make a new decision thereafter. And that is our plan. And unless something drastically changes, that's what we're going to go forward to. When you're seeing grandparents, it would be best if everyone washed their hands upon arrival at, whoever house we're gathering at. It would be best if we could do it outside because, one, the risk of transmission is lower outside because you have wind and everything like that. People don't get quite as close. And sunlight. Sunlight helps to kill the surfaces where it could be on. Being out in the sun, the virus does not last for a very long time at a contagious level. Now, there might be some tiny viral particles, but you have to have a certain number of viruses to actually get infected. So every minute of sunlight is killing a certain amount of viruses. Every minute where the humidity is really high and the sun is out and those sort of things, you're getting better. So try and make them outdoor gatherings if possible. And then have the adults wear masks, have the adults social distance. The kids can do the best that you can get them to do, knowing that it's not going to be perfect and that's going to be okay. I think that covers it all on grandparents. The other question that I got a lot of was outings. When can we go to the zoo? When can we go to the pool? When can we go to camps? Kids need summer activities. Parents need summer activities. Parents want to do fun things. Like we can't stop fun for the next 18, 24, 12, whatever months until there's a vaccine. The other question that I got a lot of is herd immunity. There is no herd immunity. Protecting yourself and social distancing at this moment is not going to impact herd immunity. Herd immunity is not present because there just isn't enough. We're talking that before there could be herd immunity, we're talking 80-90% of the population has to be immune before we get any of that benefit. Right now, it's probably less than 5% of the population has any sort of immunity to this. So there's no herd immunity at this point. So it's not safe to say, well, we've got herd immunity because we got through the first peak. We are far away from that. We won't probably have herd immunity until either a large chunk of the population has gone through coronavirus. We're talking the vast, vast majority of the world, or there's a vaccine that allows for herd immunity the way measles herd immunity is maintained by having a really high percentage of the population immune through vaccination. So there's no concern or question or ability to rely upon herd immunity, nor do you need to feel like I'm not contributing to herd immunity because we're bubbling right now. Because even if you say, okay, I want to contribute to herd immunity by doing these exposures and getting infected and going through it, we're still at such a tiny percent of the population that would be immune that we're nowhere near herd immunity. That was another question that I got. What's the best way to make sure that we're safe in these summer activities and outings? Oops. Sorry. What's the best way to stay safe in these outdoor activities? Let's start with the pool because that's a big one. I think pools can be done safely. Now, being in the pool itself is easy. Pools have chlorine, there's sunlight. The virus isn't going to get transmitted if you jump into an empty pool and swim around and then, an hour or 2 hours later, somebody else jumps into the pool and swims. You're not going to have to worry about transmission in that case because you've got chlorine and you've got sunlight, which will both help to kill the virus and limit any spread. The issue is being at the pool with friends, being in close proximity to others. every time the kids come out of the water, if their head's underwater, they come out, they just spit everywhere and create, this huge, disgusting mess of spit everywhere. They get out of the pool, they're peeing in the pool, they're, playing games in the pool, playing basketball, sharing food at the pool, sitting in close proximity. Those are kind of where all the risks occur. It's not being in the pool and going underwater and, ingesting some chlorine water. Those aren't the places where we get exposed. It's all of the proximity things. And so, what I think the best way to do it is to make sure the pool has a plan. Most pools have a plan because they want to open, because they want to serve the public. They want to serve their um, people that buy pool passes and all those sorts of things, because they need to stay in business too. And so they're going to be really hip to keeping up on social distancing, limiting the number of people at the pool, limiting how close all the chairs are together. So find out about that information before you go, and then talk to the kids. Hey, I know usually when we go to the pool it's super fun because you just run around. Actually, you walk, you don't run. But you get to play with your friends and share snacks and all those things. And the pool's going to be a little bit different for a while because we have to make sure that everyone stays safe. So we're going to kind of stay with our own family. We're going to have our own little area of the pool. We're not going to sit together on blankets and towels and all those sorts of things. Everybody kind of just stays in their same area. We can still have a lot of fun. What's your favorite thing? What are you looking forward to about the pool? Oh, I love those dive sticks too. Those Star Wars dive sticks that we have are my favorite part too. Or, water guns or those sorts of things. Whatever it is, focus on that, but say, hey, we just have to kind of take things a little bit more differently because of coronavirus. We're just all going to stay safe. There's no way that you're going to get kids to wear masks at the pool. Even in our temperature controlled office, it is so hot wearing a mask. Like, it makes the room normally would. So there's no way that you're going to keep kids in masks. There's probably no way you're going to keep many adults in masks for long at the pool without overheating. And so we just have to keep our distance. And so we're going to have our own little area. We're going to play in the pool. We're going to try and social distance, realizing that we can't do it perfectly. It's a calculated risk. It's a pretty low risk in general. So at this point in time, I think that we're going to see that pools are okay if you have a plan in place ahead of time. It might be making a reservation at the pool. It might be limiting the times that you can go to the pool or how much time you spend at the pool. It might be no food or drink. It might be things like that. But I think there's a safe way to do the pool, and our kids love going to the pool, and we're really looking forward to that summer. This summer, we don't know what it'll look like or when we're going to feel comfortable doing it, because of my exposures in healthcare and grandparents and all those sort of things. But my hope is that we'll get to the pool in short order, and I know that pools are starting to open up, so it's just an ongoing conversation to have. Things like the zoo, things like day camps or overnight camps. Honestly, like, we have this amazing children's zoo in our community, and I'm really excited. Like, we would go there all the time with our kids, and the kids love it, and it's going to look really different. And we'll probably just wait on that. The zoo, day camps where they're like doing, sports camps or overnight camps, those things are really luxury goods at this point. And right now, everybody is realizing we don't need all these luxury goods. I think we wait on those because those are going to require a lot of specific measures where kids are together. It's honestly like school, but people, like, if you're doing basketball camp, imagine how close proximity everybody is, and they're sweaty and they're breathing heavily, and it's impossible to play basketball without being really in close proximity to others. So things like that, things like art camps, I just treat those as a luxury good, and everyone's realized that we don't need as many luxury goods right now. Overnight camps, same thing. I don't think, like, our kids go to sleepaway camp for a week every summer is something that I loved growing up, and our kids go to the same camp that I went to. My wife and I were camp counselors. Like, that's something that's important to us and meaningful. But I don't think there's a safe way to do that at this point where everyone's sleeping in the same rooms, and those sorts of things. So camping as a family, going out into the wilderness, doing outdoors things, perfectly fine. But these confined spaces where there's a lot of kids together, it's just not the time for those sort of luxury items at this moment. So I guess that would be my take on day camps. Big discussion. What was your takeaway from this discussion? If you could leave a comment below saying what you agree with, what you disagree with, what other question that you have, that would be so helpful for me for doing these. And if you liked these and appreciated these, I would love to know that too, because it would help me to know, okay, people are enjoying this, it's worthwhile, it's helping, and it's making a difference. Daycare, grandparents, sleepaway camps, all those sort of things. I would love it if you would comment below what you've taken away and what you'll do different going forward. I really like doing these, and I get such good feedback from so many people about how valuable they are. I would love it if you would take a moment and share it. If you're watching on YouTube, if you can hit the subscribe button, that would be great. If you're watching on Facebook, if you could hit share and share it with your people, that would be great, because it's an important message that I think a lot of people want to share and want to have good information. And I hope that that's what I'm providing you, is with some peace of mind and reassurance about how to do all these things. I have a content calendar that we kind of work on over the course of the year of what we're going to talk about. And it just completely got blown out of the water this year. Wasn't expecting to even talk about coronaviruses at all. And that's even what it's called, is the coronavirus checkup. That's not something I was anticipating. So please keep up the good work. Please share this. Please comment, and keep doing what you're doing. Stay strong.